Well, I am looking forward to this evening. If you were here for the previous 5th District debate, we had the 6 most prominent candidates, and our stage was absolutely full. And it was a fun event, but very challenging with so many candidates. So the goal was really to have them introduce themselves to voters in the 5th District. Tonight, the goal is a little bit different. This is really, with the final 2 candidates, your opportunity to hear a bit more in depth what they say they would do if elected to this position. So it sort of changes the program just a little bit in what we're doing and allows for the candidates to be a bit more expansive. That being said, we do have a clock to try and keep the pace of this going so that we can get a lot of different topics. There's so many important issues in this district to get them included. We are going to go straight through with the broadcast portion of this. It's 52 minutes. So we're going to start it off just as the broadcast, go straight through. Once we're done with the 52-minute part that will be broadcast tomorrow on AirTalk at noon, then we'll have an opportunity to take a few audience questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time to take a lot because the candidates are on a breakneck schedule, and we can't keep them too long because they've just got so much going on every day. But we can take a few audience questions. So we're going to go through, collect the cards that you've got. We'll take a look, try and find the ones we think have the most universal appeal within the district, and then we'll ask you to come on up and to read your card for the live portion of the program if your question's chosen. Please make sure you put your name as well as the community that you're from on that card so we can call you out after the radio recorded portion of it and have you come up and line up to ask your question. Well, let me introduce the 2 candidates who are going to be joining us. First, we're setting them alphabetically. Be immediately to my left, Kathryn Barger. Ms. Barger, if you'd please come on up. And also joining us, Darrell Park. Sir, please come right on up. Thank you. All right. From the Crawford Family Forum at KPCC, this is AirTalk in person. I'm Larry Mantle. We're bringing you a debate between the finalists to succeed Mike Antonovich as 5th District LA County Supervisor. Being an LA County Supervisor is probably the most overlooked, powerful position in all of California government. 5 office holders control a $28 billion budget. Each supervisor represents 2 million residents. In my opinion, only the governor and heads of the state legislature have more influential governmental positions in California than the supervisors. That's probably why LA County supervisors have avoided running for other offices. Supervisors leave reluctantly via term limits. Mike Antonovich is out after serving 36 years. Don Knabe is termed out in the 4th District after 20 years, and we'll have a debate for that seat coming up in a couple of weeks. Well, back in late May, we brought together the 6 strongest candidates for this seat to our Crawford Family Forum. The June primary gave us the 2 candidates who join us this time. On November 8th, 5th District voters will choose between the longtime Chief Deputy for Mike Antonovich, Kathryn Barger, and former staffer for the White House Office of Management and Budget, Darrell Park. So let's go right into our first question. Mr. Park, you're a newcomer to local government. It's a huge job, massive departments of health, mental health, social services, children's and family services, housing, parks. Of the 4 finalists for these 2 board seats, you're the only one who hasn't been involved with county government. So what gives you confidence that you have the in-depth knowledge of how the county operates to effectively handle all these areas?
Thanks, Larry. I worked for 10 years in the Office of Management and Budget in the White House complex. We balanced the budget 4 times. Those are big departments. The county is huge with a nearly $30 billion budget. But we were able to do it at the federal level with all the bureaucracy and all the red tape. We have a county government that's not functioning properly. Nobody can look me in the eye and say that their money, their tax dollars in this county are being spent well. We have a lot of well-intended folks doing a lot of well-intended things, but the money's just not being spent well. We have solutions to all of our problems. Other taxpayers in other places have solved these problems. We just need to make sure that we implement those solutions. So I've been there and I've done it at a much bigger scale than this one, and I'm really looking forward to doing it here.
Can I ask you just a quick,
Yes.
specific example, what you would implement, what change you would advocate along the lines you just mentioned?
So right now, every one of you is paying tax dollars. Every single homeless person you see on the street, you're paying $40,000 for that person. You can't point to a pair of shoes you bought them or a tent or a meal. The $900 million that we're spending on the homeless folks aren't solving their problems. They're not helping them. It's really well intended, but we're not solving the problems. If you look at the state of Utah, they got their folks into housing. Even at LA prices, it's less than $20,000. So you get people the support they need. It's not a mansion, it's not a penthouse or a beach house. It's a little cinder block apartment, but you build in the support services they need. There's a clock on the wall so they can take their medication if they need to. This has been done. Other taxpayers already figured this out.
All right. Ms. Barger, though you haven't held elective office either, you've been on the inside of county bureaucracy. That might make your transition easier if you were elected to this position, but it also means you've been spending a lot of your time close to the sausage making, so to speak. What fresh ideas would you be able to bring when you've been on the inside so long?
Well, I mean, that is a good question, and on several issues. For example, on foster care. Right now, I'm not waiting for the election. There are things that are being done now in real time, working toward addressing issues as it relates to the fact that we're having a tough time recruiting foster parents because of the change of the system, moving away from group homes. We're putting together a visitation system, capitalizing with Uber and other transit organizations to get people to their visitation with their children, which has been a barrier for foster parents. So there are issues, and it's a constant challenge. I mean, the county changes. The homeless issue for us is something that I'm looking forward to working. I'm working closely with Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas, and in fact, when I received Mayor Eric Garcetti's endorsement, we talked about the fact that we need to work together because LA City has the largest homeless population, and we need to look at affordable housing, but also the resources and wraparound services needed.
And can you give us an example of something where it's an outside idea, something like Mr. Park did with the Utah housing model that you think would fit in LA County that the board hasn't done yet?
Well, I mean, we're talking right now, there's a company, a nonprofit that's putting together containers and retrofitting them for housing. And they've approached the county and asked if we would be interested in partnering with them and looking at that. That's something that's outside the box and is affordable in terms of affordable housing, at least for transitional. The goal is to create jobs and have job training so that we can get people into jobs so that they can get off of the welfare rolls. When we talk about the $30 billion budget, 2/3 of LA County's budget is health and welfare. And so we need to look at how we create the jobs so that when we address the homeless issue, housing is only one component.
Let's hear from a KPCC listener. We have 4 recorded listener questions to sprinkle into this debate.
This is Zahir from South Pasadena. As candidates, you both have very different relationships with the outgoing supervisor. How will your tenure on the Board of Supervisors be similar and or different than that of Supervisor Antonovich?
Darrell Park?
Our current supervisor has been here for 36 years. He's extremely conservative, extremely conservative. His homophobia, xenophobia, Islamophobia, those things are well documented. We need to have a county that includes everybody. We need to have a 5th district. We speak 200 languages in this 5th district. We need to be inclusive. We need to include everyone. We do not need to put up barriers to anybody being healthy and happy here. everybody needs to be included.
Ms. Barger?
Well, as someone who's worked for him for 28 years, handling health and welfare, I can tell you that I'm going to build on that legacy and strengthen the services to LA County residents. And I've learned from the best. I started working with Kenny Hahn, Ed Edelman, Pete Shabaram, Mike Antonovich, and Dean Dana. And the challenges were different then. I've now have a close relationship with Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, who's endorsed me, as well as Hilda Solis, Mark Ridley Thomas, and whoever takes over for the 4th District. And so I am different than the Supervisor Antonovich, but I understand, based on the fact that he gave me opportunities to work within the county, especially as it relates to health and welfare, that I'm going to build on the relationships that we've built in the 5th District, which is why he was reelected and has served for 36 years.
Do you agree with the characterization Mr. Park made of your former boss, homophobic, Islamophobic, et cetera?
Absolutely.
You think he is?
I absolutely disagree with what he
You
just said.
disagree?
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
No, I mean, for me,
I'm so shocked.
No,
I know,
no,
yeah.
but I mean, that's like raise your hand. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I'm not going to debate for Supervisor Antonovich, and those comments are. He's not here to debate them. I'm not going to debate them. They're not true, and we'll leave it at that. He's not running against Supervisor Antonovich. He's running against Kathryn Barger.
We're talking with Kathryn Barger, Darrell Park. They're the candidates running off November 8th, California ballot here at Los Angeles County, 5th District, LA County Board of Supervisors. You're listening to a KPCC in-person AirTalk debate from our Crawford Family Forum. Mr. Park, you have endorsements from the County Democratic Party that likely allowed you to do extremely well in the primary election, having that endorsement as you finished higher than better-known candidates. You had to build name recognition. You were the only candidate to run a specifically partisan race for what's a nonpartisan seat. But Ms. Barger, as she has mentioned in her campaign, has more Democratic Party members endorsing her, more elected officials endorsing her. She also has labor union endorsements that on your page I don't see anything comparable. So given that you're running as a Democrat, why don't you have more endorsements from sitting Democratic office holders and from labor unions?
We have to understand that we in the 5th District have been in a very unusual situation. You've had the same person in power for 36 years, extremely powerful, extremely able to control everything that goes on, not just in this district, but in this county. Very able to use the budget to sort of do what was needed to be done for him to stay in power. You look everywhere, there's signs with his name on it, paid for with your tax dollars. When I talk to folks, you know, there's 36 mayors that have endorsed. Sometimes it feels like a hostage situation because people are stuck in a situation where their political career, you know, the economy of whatever thing they're heading up is really dependent on the current situation. So of course, you have a choice. You can stick with what we've had for all this time, which I would make an argument that it's not working very well.
Finish your point.
Okay,
We're just
I would
at the
argue that it's
time.
not working well, or you can go with a grassroots campaign. We only had $200,000 and we beat out $7 million of organized, crazy money.
Let me just follow up and
Yes.
reset the clock. What specifically are those office holders afraid of? Because your point is about that the power that the supervisor has, but he's leaving office, and
He's running for Senate. So
so you're saying
So there's
if he wins the Senate, they're afraid of
No, there's a tremendous amount of power. Even though there's only less than 30 days left till the election, people have had a long time. There have been 12 years since term limits were passed. They built portions of the Great Wall of China in less than 12 years. It's a long time to line up all the ducks, all the unions, everybody else. And just, you have to ask yourself, what is your money buying in that situation?
All right, Ms. Barger.
Well, a lot of the endorsements I received, including from the opponents that were on the stage last time you had us, endorsed me, and there was no threat against them. A lot of the endorsements that I picked up were after the primary. Up in the Santa Cruz Valley, one of my opponents picked up most of the endorsements, and now they've endorsed me. So I don't know that theory actually is necessarily true. As it relates to people like Sheila Kuehl and Eric Garcetti, I don't think there's anything that is threatening about feeling like they're held hostage endorsing me. I believe that it is based on my experience. If you look at the endorsements I received, and for full disclosure, my husband was in law enforcement, and so I have a close connection to law enforcement.
He was a sheriff's deputy?
He was a sheriff's deputy, and I have a close relationship with law enforcement because I really do have a strong commitment to supporting public safety. And so those endorsements were based on actions, not fear. And I'm proud of them. And it speaks volumes to the fact that this is a nonpartisan race. And I personally believe that people are tired of partisan politics. They want to know, what are you going to do to make sure that you are representing us? And that is my commitment. It's not about dividing the line and saying R or D. It's about getting the job done.
Let's talk about your union endorsements. You have tremendous support from public employee unions, not just law enforcement community. And some voters might be wary of this, concerned you wouldn't be in a position to negotiate on behalf of taxpayers, that you would be beholden to unions, that Mr. Park wouldn't necessarily, because if he were to win, he would win without union support. So how would you intend to negotiate on behalf of the taxpayers, not on the people who helped elect you?
Well, if you look at the track record in terms of how the county is negotiated, and the board does not directly negotiate, and I handled, as Mike's chief of staff, negotiations from the standpoint of we have a team that goes in and negotiates with our unions, and then they bring it back to the board. So there's no direct involvement. But if you look at the record in terms of the time that I've been working with the supervisor on this, we gave zero pay cut or pay raises during the economy when it downturned. And so we've held the line, and the union, especially SEIU, the endorsement came out of respect, not out of anything, any thought that I'm going to be in their pocket. They know that they've always had access. I listen to what they have to say and provide that to the supervisor. And it's not just about pay; it's about caseloads with the social workers and bringing down the caseload. So it goes on and on beyond salaries.
Well, a number of different work environment issues, but one of the biggest financial issues for taxpayers, is the liabilities for the pensions for county employees. So that's going to require some very dogged negotiation.
And I led the charge on changing the current pension as it relates to health care for retirees, to which the unions originally did not want to do. But they recognized when they came in that it was not sustainable to continue down the road we were. So we actually changed our pension program for new hires, which is why the county's credit rating went from a AA- to a AA. So we have challenged, and pensions are something that are very important to follow.
Mr. Park,
So
how would you negotiate on these issues?
Well, let's just be clear factually. If somebody is offering somebody millions of dollars in support, even if it's indirect support, you can't reasonably think that they're not buying something for their millions of dollars. For these union endorsements, I literally was not even invited to interview or fill out questionnaires. So as a startup entrepreneur, I'll tell you, when we have an opportunity to not spend money, hey, let's not spend the money. If your worst case scenario between two candidates is a guy who was raised with hippie parents who's very pro-union, if that's your worst case scenario, why not just keep your millions of dollars on the sidelines and save your members money for some other time? So every part of these discussions and these debates are for everybody to make up their own mind, but I would just ask you to think about, what are those organizations buying with their massive amounts of money?
Ms. Barger.
Darrell, you and I interviewed with SEIU together. You were in there, and you asked me what I was doing there because I'm a Republican.
I was not invited. Somebody told me about it 2 hours before, and I basically showed up at the door, and they said, okay, whatever. There was no questionnaire I got to fill out.
Okay,
There
well,
was no anything.
I know nothing. I just know that when I walked in for my interview, you asked what I was doing there because I'm a Republican, and they don't endorse Republicans.
No, the head of the organization is a Republican.
Yeah.
Mr. Park, last month, a local judge ordered this statement struck from your sample ballot statement. Los Angeles County cannot afford to elect a supervisor who will support Donald Trump's extreme Republican agenda. What comments or actions has Ms. Barger made or taken that lead you to believe she supports the most controversial part of Donald Trump's agenda?
So she's run the office for 15 years, and she's a nice lady. I love hanging out in green rooms with her. We have great conversations. But
They do get along very well.
there's a separation between someone's work persona and their non-work persona. In the work persona, for 15 years, she's run the office. Her boss is more conservative than Donald Trump, and he's been in office. All you have to do is go look at what the Justice Department has done against our Sheriff's Department, against our jails. We've paid out millions of dollars in sheriff's abuse claims. We've had kids die in foster care. Things are not going well. And when you have extreme situations like this, part of the reason you know that it's an extreme situation, and I'll tell you this as a White House person, the federal government can't watch everybody, but if they come in and watch you, that means you are not doing a good job.
But what does that have to do with Donald? For example, if Mike Antonovich had talked about building a wall as Donald Trump did,
let's talk factually. The Justice Department found that not only were we abusing our prisoners, we were targeting people of color in our traffic stops. We were targeting people of color with the housing, where they would bust in without a warrant. And the county had to pay millions of dollars.
So you're saying Mike Antonovich was largely responsible for that?
He did not. He voted to spend the money, but he did not vote for any of the remediation that would have prevented these problems. You take where we are as a county and his history of statements and his history of the things he's voted for, and I'm not saying Kathryn is a horrible person. I'm not saying she is him. I'm saying she ran his office.
All right, Ms. Barger.
Well, no, I almost think we should have had Mike sit in this chair, because that's Mike. I'm Kathryn. And if you look at, again, my endorsements, or even read the LA Times endorsement of me, I think it really does spell out the difference between Mike and I and the vision that I have moving forward with the county. And getting back to the endorsements, take the union out of it. If you look at the bipartisan support I have from people that, by the way, have not endorsed Supervisor Antonovich for Senate, but have endorsed me. And I think that's an important thing to note as well, that they recognize the differences and are supporting me based on the belief that I am capable and would be a good county supervisor.
No, I mean, let's talk about that for a second.
Briefly.
Okay, so you look at Mike Antonovich and his record, anti-immigrant. You look at Don Knabe and his record, anti-immigrant. You look at the Republican Party, anti-immigrant. I'm not saying Kathryn is that. What I am saying is you need to look at those endorsements and say, wait a minute, what kind of county do we want going forward? The demographics are not what they were in 1980.
And again, what specifically you're saying was anti-immigrant that Mike Antonovich said or did? What?
I think it's
that he didn't support.
It's pretty well established. He doesn't support any form of immigration reform. He's been and these things are well documented. You guys are getting flyers in your mailbox, not from me, but from other folks involved in the election process.
Okay, and I don't want to go too far on the Mike Antonovich, but you're essentially raising this and tying her to his
I'm saying she ran the office. That's what I'm saying.
Ms. Barger, quick response, and we're moving on.
I'm speechless. I mean, for me, I am Mike's chief of staff. Mike is a supervisor. Mike is not anti-immigration. Matter of fact, when we go back to D.C., we talk about moving forward with immigration reform, in fact, because of the impact it has in L.A. County. And one of the concerns that we have is the fact that you've got people that are here without papers that are being victimized. And so if anything, I would argue that we have taken an active role in working toward that. And again, if you look at the relationships that I have made and developed and the endorsements that I have versus the one the supervisors does not have, I think it dispels that rumor as well.
Let's hear another listener comment, but first let me just, in case you just joined us, you're listening to the runoff for the 5th District LA County Board of Supervisors debate. Darrell Park, Kathryn Barger are here November 8th. LA County residents in the 5th District of Northeast Los Angeles County will have a chance to choose between these two candidates to succeed Mike Antonovich as LA County Supervisor. So let's hear from another one of our listeners with her question.
This is Judy from South Pasadena, and I'd like to know if the candidates are for or against the proposed 710 tunnel.
Gosh, a South Pasadena resident who would guess that they're so interested in that. Let's see, I can't remember who I started with. I think Ms. Barger, I think it's your turn to start if I'm not. Yeah, so 710 freeway and the tunneling project specifically.
Yeah, and actually, I just had a discussion with someone from South Pasadena about this very issue. The EIR is coming out, and my position has and continues to be that as someone who lives in this area, I'm not going to wait to debate the tunnel. I believe there's mitigating things that can be done immediately. You can look at the synchronization of the signals. You can look at reverse flow. And this term is for 12 years. This tunnel will not be built. I guarantee you.
But you're sidestepping the issue of whether you support the tunnel or not.
Because honestly, I'm not, to me, let's say it's built. It's not built. No one is doing anything immediately to address the fact that we have a severe traffic problem. The opening of the Gold Line has created even more of a traffic jam getting east and west through Pasadena and even north and south. And so I think that that this is going to have to come to Metro. Caltrans is going to make the ultimate decision with the Measure M tax that came forward. The monies for the 710 was pulled out, which I supported it being pulled out of the language for Measure M.
Measure M is the
Metro
sales
tax, is the Metro half-cent sales tax that's moving forward.
plan.
That was pulled out, and in fact, I was informed that language was put in there that it can't. None of the money in Measure M can go toward the 710, which is a huge issue as it relates to even building it.
Sure, and it's a long-term project, but you've got some of your potential constituents who are going to feel like this tunnel is going to be a disaster, we don't want it. You've got other of your constituents going to feel like this missing part of the freeway needs to be finished. The tunnel is the best way to do it. Caltrans has done a study with Metro on this. So they're looking to you for leadership on
Okay,
this.
and my leadership would be then, if I look at the tunnel as it relates to trucks, I would not allow trucks to go through it. It's going to be a toll. And I feel that trucks are dangerous. I'm not comfortable with tunneling under homes, so I'm not comfortable with the alignment of the tunnel at this point. But I'm not going to take a firm position because until the EIR is certified, I believe that you have to be open, especially if you are one of the board members on the MTA. But understand that even if that decision is not made, my commitment is to work immediately with some of the cities that are not doing synchronization and are creating gridlock in Alhambra, going into South Pasadena, heading into Los Angeles. I believe there are things that can be done now that are not being done for political reasons.
All right, Mr. Park, 710 and the tunnel option to complete.
I'll make this easy and straightforward. I am opposed to the 710 extension in any form. That means road, that means skyway, that means tunnel. The tunnel is a death trap. I lived in South Pass for 10 years. As a longtime resident there, I am 100% opposed. We will not let it happen. We will improve things by taking some of the truck traffic from the ports and putting that on rail and moving that to other places. But we will never, ever, ever, ever let the 710 extension happen in any form.
So how do you deal with communities like Alhambra or parts of Northeast Los Angeles, El Sereno, that are dealing with the effects of the traffic being dumped onto their streets? What do you say to them?
We've had the traffic situation literally for 50 years. They've tried to move this project forward for 50 years. There are many, many things that can be done to improve the traffic flow. Technology is going to help out quite a bit. We will put, like I said before, the truck traffic on the rails. They don't want to do that now because it costs them money where they can just use the roads for free. We will put that traffic there. We will do other things that enable these communities to stay preserved at the same time.
Well, they've heard all these those communities don't think that's going to work.
So then the choice of what they need to do in terms of voting is relatively clear.
Ms. Barger.
Well, and actually on this, I do agree with Darrell. But it takes leadership to push it forward. They haven't agreed, but a leader would say, for example, on the rail, he's right. There's been a pushback because it's a short haul, and so they don't make as much money. We have to encourage inland ports because a lot of the goods movement is leaving the state. So these are things that, as a leader, you have to push forward and not wait for a vote on the 710. These are things that can be done immediately. And again, on the synchronization of lights, this is something that can be done immediately. And I also agree with him that with technology the way it is, you see cars coming forward, and I know that people think this is not, is a pie in the sky, but there may come a time when we're gonna have cars that are driverless cars, and that's gonna address some of this issue.
Next question, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Park. One of the big environmental and public safety issues in this district is a proposal by the LA County Flood Control District to remove huge amounts of sediment from behind Devil's Gate Dam. The project would take a dump truck load after dump truck. I haven't even finished my question. He's holding up a sign. We'll read it for you in a moment. And environmentalists have filed a suit against the county, asking them to come up with mitigating and alternative measures instead of all the truckloads and all the removal that would affect the habitat in Hahamunga's watershed. So you now hold up a sign, Save Hahamunga. What do you advocate for cleaning the sediment out, which poses a flood risk?
Yes, so there is a flood risk to 477 homes. That is a very substantial concern because they have not done the maintenance over time. You have to understand that this is between 400 and 500 dump truck trips per day, and I assume maybe they take a couple of holidays off, but it's for 5 years. And they don't take that sediment and put that at the beach where they need it. They take that sediment and they put it in a hole in Irwindale. It does not make sense. They're talking about nearly $100 million.
You'd advocate taking all that sediment to the beach on the freeways?
No,
Really?
no. So how did the sediment get there? It didn't get there by trucks. It got there through water. There are lots of other places in the world where they've gotten really good at moving slurry down. The taxpayers, your parents and grandparents, paid for amazing channels down to the beach. There's lots of really well thought out plans in other places in the world where they take that combination of water and sediment and get that to the beach where it's needed.
Move it 30 some miles or whatever?
Yes, you might have heard of this thing called gravity.
Spell that for me.
Yeah.
So and this is an alternative that's been proposed to slurry the sediment, that amount of sediment, down the Arroyo to the LA River?
The idea that we need sediment in one place and we're going to truck it and put it in a hole in another place doesn't make sense. The idea that you'd spend $100 million, the engineers that built LA County are some of the most amazing people you can ever imagine. How could you have 10 million people live in a desert with all the stuff we have here? They did an amazing job. And now you're saying, oh, the best we can do is take a bunch of trucks into a quiet residential neighborhood? No, we can be smart about this.
Ms. Barger, what do you think of the county's plan here?
Well, the county's plan, originally the county wanted to come in without an EIR and totally take out all the vegetation out of the dam. We asked for an EIR to come forward and actually work with the city of Pasadena and looked at their footprint in terms of they had a plan going in terms of what the vegetation that they felt was needed to be saved. So we incorporated that. So we substantially cut down the amount of sediment being removed. We met with the homeowners, and in fact, the issue is how many loads a day. The homeowners who are impacted wanted it to be over a shorter period of time, so they wanted, they were willing to have more truckloads going out.
To get the job done
To get the job done sooner. Having said that, this was a real concern because of the fact that we were going to have the rains and it was going to be flooding and we were going to flood downstream. I have taken a position that I'm open to discussing with people like Tim Brick, who's one of the individuals that has filed the lawsuit, revisiting this issue and talking about it in terms of what we can do. Because understand the reason why we're in this position is because flood control failed over the years to clean it out.
It's been decades.
Decades, and what happened was with the station fire, You had a lot of debris that came down after the station fire, and then the rain that came down and created this problem. So I believe there may be room to come up with some sort of agreement.
So you think a compromise
I
is
think
possible that'll satisfy the
Well,
residents?
you know, I would hope so. I know that the county did compromise. Public Works was not happy when we requested an EIR, but we felt that was an appropriate thing to do given the vegetation. Even though it's not native vegetation, it is vegetation that now has taken hold down there. We compromised on the size or footprint of what was planned to be cleaned out, and we compromised on the number of loads that would be taken out. So I'm willing to sit down. I mean, nothing good is accomplished by a lawsuit other than lawyers getting wealthy.
So let's hear another question for our candidate's 5th District LA County Board of Supervisors race, a KPCC listener.
This is Anne from Altadena. The courts seem to have a huge backlog, and there don't seem to be enough judges to hear cases. How do you plan to alleviate the situation?
Ms. Barger.
Unfortunately, I don't even know how many years ago the state took over the courts. The county used to own all the courts, and actually the judges worked and the clerks all worked for the County of Los Angeles. That was moved up to the state, so unfortunately we do not have jurisdiction over the courts. I would love, and I know there are a lot of judges out there that would agree, would rather have it back in local control versus state control, because there's a disconnect, and you have a lot of judges leaving the bench as a result of that, and so you've got a backlog. You've got clerks being laid off because of state budget. So unfortunately, it doesn't fall directly on the county's footsteps. That is a state-controlled issue.
Mr. Park.
We have to look very carefully at the racial bias of our court system and our justice system here. People will claim in the sheriff's department and in the court system that there's not enough money. The truth is we are not doing what we need to do, and we're not treating people equally. The courthouse in the Antelope Valley, which is named after the current supervisor, is called the slave ship on dry land. You have higher incarceration rates than anywhere else in the county. You look at what the Justice Department said about how we do things in this county, it does not make sense. We know there's racial bias everywhere in the country, but you look at the list of places that the Justice Department put us with, you're talking places like Mississippi and Kansas and Alabama. We have enough money. We have enough judges. We have enough resources to do everything properly. We have to eliminate that racial bias.
So, Mr. Park, you think more white people need to be in county facilities to equal things out? Or do you think that there are African Americans and Latinos in county facilities that shouldn't be there? And if you think that's the case, what crimes are they being held for that you think they shouldn't be in custody?
We have a system that's based on, imagine if you went to the dentist and the dentist said, hey, remember how you come in every 6 months to get your teeth cleaned? We're not doing that anymore. Don't brush, don't floss, eat as much candy as you want, just come back in 10 years. You go back in 10 years, you need $20,000 worth of root canals. That's exactly how the county is dealing with the vast majority of the services it hands out. We need to do preventative things. Juvie costs $234,000 per kid per year. You know how much summer camp costs? We need to do preventative things. So in answer to your direct question, you look at the stats. There's no way that, and this is a national problem, but we have a worse problem here. There's a racial bias. You have to look at who's ending up there, why.
But we're talking about, and I understand what you're saying, an important issue. We're talking about costs of the courts. The question was about the court system and how to deal with that. So my question was about which prosecution. You're saying it's a systemic issue. The county needs to front load more resources. So how many spots for kids camp? What remedial things?
Every single kid. We know that IQ is connected to things like before school care, after school care, summer camp. I know that the jail system is going to cost me $75,000 a year with a 73% recidivism rate. I know the before school care and the after school care are pennies on the dollar compared to that. I know the summer camp is literally almost free compared to that. I know the rich kids and the middle class kids are already covered.
Okay.
So I have to cover a relatively small portion of those folks. But look at the money you're already spending. It's so much a better deal
Okay.
to spend that money in advance.
So, Ms. Barger, this is sort of more from the backup of the courts to a criminal justice
Right, but
incarceration
you do
issue.
understand that the county does not control the courts.
Yes,
We don't
but the
appoint.
county, he's
Right.
talking about the jail.
Okay,
the
but I
lock-
mean, in
yeah.
answer to the original
No,
question.
it's a state
Okay.
court system, no.
Right.
But
I just wanna
he
make sure that we're
sidestepped, he
clear.
took it from
Okay.
the state to the county.
Okay.
So I thought, well, let's talk about this issue that he raised. It is an important one. So you think the county should create a variety of youth programs in an effort to head off crimes committed as those kids get older?
Absolutely, and in fact, there are programs in place, especially during summer hours in our county parks, that are there just for that reason, to keep kids off the street and get them involved in activities outside of gangs, outside of crime activity. We also need to look at, though, at our foster youth that are crossing over into probation and address what is going on, and education is the key. We need to get these kids early and keep them in school and get them education so that they don't end up on our streets or end up in our probation camps or even in our jails.
As long as we're on the topic of the county's criminal justice system, the county sheriff is directly elected by voters, so the Board of Supervisors doesn't control the sheriff's office. But supervisors do have significant influence when it comes to the sheriff's department. Do you support a citizens oversight committee for the sheriff's department that would also have subpoena power to be able to get documents from departmental investigations? Ms. Barger.
I support the Citizens Oversight Advisory. I do not support subpoena powers because right now in place is an individual that's been appointed to have the oversight that has those subpoena powers, that looks and then provides that information to the commission to give access to a personnel file to individuals that are on advisory board. I think violates the police officer's Bill of Rights. And therefore, I think that given to one individual who then will put a report together that is not beholden to the county, to the supervisors, or to the advisory committee that will give a factual report is sufficient.
Who is the person, or I'm sorry, who is the body that hires the person for that inspector general, that oversight
It
position?
is appointed by the board. It's Max Huntsman right now, who came from the district attorney's office. But that individual then, and then they're hiring someone within the commission that the commission will hire. I mean, that is being vetted through the county.
So the commission would then choose the successor to Max Huntsman. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. Max Huntsman is the point person. He is the
Okay.
one, he is the individual that looks at any activities as it relates to
Use of
sheriff's.
force and-
Use of force and all that, and then makes recommendations.
All right. Mr. Park, do you support subpoena power for the whole Citizens
Yes,
Commission?
but we're going to go farther, and hang with me for a second. Even calling it the Citizens Commission, no, it's not going to be called that, because we're going to have undocumented workers on that commission. We're going to have sex workers on that commission. We're going to have homeless folks that have been abused by the sheriff's department. We're going to have, it's about power. Why do people get abused? Because they don't have power. Well, what happens if you turn that power system around and those folks are the ones deciding who goes through the training, whether they pass the training or not, whether they get promoted or not? We need to have oversight. We don't have oversight now, and that's why you're paying $45 million a year. The other
You're
thing
talking about court settlements for use of force and
yes,
other...
and that's a teeny fraction of the abuse that actually happens. And we have a great sheriff now, but he's only one person. We need to make a change to our sheriff's department. So 2 other quick things. When you've got the folks in any other place, they've got body cameras. If a small town can figure that out, why haven't we figured that out? Once we get those, we're not going to turn those over to the sheriff's department. With your body camera, when you're done at the end of your shift, you're going to give that to a separate administrative agency. They get to look at that footage. They get to decide what gets released and when it gets released.
Every shift? That's just physically, I mean,
No, it's not.
That's impossible.
How is the video downloaded
It would take
now?
I mean, I just have to stop you. That would take hundreds of people. The number of sheriff's deputies to go through every
How
hour
is
of
it
footage?
done now, Larry? It's done in every one of these departments. How do they
They
categorize
look at every piece of body camera footage?
They have
What
all the
department
body
does that?
No, they have all the footage there. It gets turned over to a different agency. I'm not saying that every second of the tape is watched.
Oh, okay,
What
I
I'm
misunderstood
saying
you, I'm
is
sorry.
that they get to preview everything. They don't need subpoena power because it's theirs. It's their job. And you know what? You're not only going to see people being beat up, you're going to see some really heartwarming stories of like,
Okay.
oh, here's somebody playing football.
Ms. Barger, you want to respond to that proposal?
To which proposal?
The proposal that all body camera footage would not be kept at the department, go to an oversight body.
Right now, LA County is working out all the specifics as it relates to body cameras. But as we've seen with a situation, a couple of weeks ago, body cameras do not tell the whole story. So I want to caution everyone with the fact that a body cam is not going to be an aha moment. We want to use that as a tool not only to protect the citizens, but also to protect law enforcement. So, you know, I think the devil is in the details, and you are right. It would be physically impossible for us to go through every ounce of footage. And actually,
But I
that's-
misunderstood him.
No,
That's on
but
me.
even to the point where you have to understand that we keep that information. It's going to have to be kept over a period of time. So the question is, where do we store it? How much is it going to cost? These are very, very costly and serious decisions that need to be made, and they're being made. Sheriff Jim McDonald's putting together protocol now as it relates to that, and figuring out how we are going to store the data on the cameras.
We're talking with the two candidates for the 5th District LA County Board of Supervisors race, Kathryn Barger and Darrell Park. With this quick comment, because I got to squeeze another question.
This
in
is
before
one
we-
more thing. If a small town in Middle America can figure this out, the fact that LA County hasn't figured it out shows you how badly messed up our county structure is.
I have
Yeah.
to respond to that.
Okay, quick response.
It has nothing to do with how messed up the county is. It has to do with the fact that there have been a lot of missteps throughout the country and a lot of waste of money. We want to do it right because we're talking about a system that is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. So why would we rush into something, or would we take lessons learned and incorporate those into what we put together? And that's what's being done. And I commend Sheriff Jim McDonald
Okay.
for doing that.
Report last year showed LA County spent about $1 billion total responding to homelessness. About $100 million of targeted funding included in the latest budget. How much do you think it would take the county to spend to make serious inroads into housing, mental health services, wraparound services for the homeless? And where could that money come from? Ms. Barger?
The homeless issue is not going to be solved overnight, and the county alone can't do it. It's important to work with our 88 cities, especially as it relates to the affordable housing. If you look at what the county did over the last year in allocating redevelopment dollars was the money that the state took away from the cities to build in blighted areas. We invested that in affordable housing, and in fact, it went a lot to veterans, and that number has gone down as it relates to the homeless. So we know it does work to invest with nonprofits, faith-based, working on a housing component, especially on transitional housing. Long-term housing is a challenge and needs to be looked at, and I believe that we need to sit down and roll up our sleeves and look at the red tape and how we incentivize developers to build affordable housing, because this market is very expensive. And I was just up in the Antelope Valley today, and they were talking about the fact that rents are going up there. So we need to look at that. And where does the money come from? The money comes from reinvesting in the redevelopment dollars that we currently have in place, but also looking at moving money from areas such as where we've got welfare vouchers for short-term housing, and look at reinvesting that.
Mr. Park?
When I worked in the White House complex, we had a huge problem. We had families that were out of work, 20 million of. There were 20 million folks that were out of work in one or underemployed or somehow not reaching their full potential. 20 million new jobs got created. Folks that were taking families that were taking $20,000 out of the system every year. All of a sudden, when you get back to work, you're putting in $5,000. So that's a difference of one family of $25,000. When you do that over a whole economy, you're talking about $500 billion surplus. When you look at what we're dealing with the homeless, if you can, they found that in these other places, the top 20% of those folks get back to work within 60 days. If they're not running Google, they're not maybe running a whole state or something. They got a little job at a little store, a little deli, or they're working at a food bank. if you can pay back into the system, you get those folks from the point where they're using $40,000 to the point where they're paying in a few $1,000s. That changes the numbers. The real number that you're asking for is, to sustain this, it's about $1.3 billion. But that's going to be made up over time, just like Utah, just like Ottawa, with the savings. They have hundreds of millions of dollars of savings.
All right. Let me move on to another listener question. Someone concerned about housing prices, aren't we all, and quality of life.
This is Kelly in Altadena. In regards to gentrification, how can the district embrace change and allow for improvements without pushing out long-time minority and low-income residents?
Mr. Park.
This is a big concern of mine. I lived for a number of years in the city of Washington, D.C., and I watched my neighbors who'd been there for generations get pushed out as new fancy condos and other things came about. I am 100% committed to making sure that does not happen, especially in some of our more historic neighborhoods. One of the things that we can do, we've seen it with the small house movement in a lot of other places, is we have our 18 to 34-year-olds living with their parents. They need a place to live, but they can't afford anything outside of their parents' house right now. We can build small places with mortgages $175,000 to $275,000. These places are well constructed. There'll be a lot of infill. There's a lot of parking lots now that aren't going to be parking lots forever because there's self-driving cars and there's Uber and Lyft, and we're already not needing the parking in some places that we needed before. We have an opportunity as things change to make really thoughtful decisions and create the housing that we want, not just mega houses, but houses for real people.
Ms. Barger.
I mean, this is not a 1-minute answer, because I know, as someone who bought my house 25 years ago, when I sell it, I'm going to make a profit because I bought it 25 years ago. And I don't think government should be dictating to people how much they can charge when they sell their homes. I believe that we need to be very careful about tearing down and building condominiums in places. She's from Altadena. I believe that the Community Standards District that's in place protects neighborhoods, and I completely support that. I don't support going in and tearing down homes and building condominiums in areas where they've got a Community Standards District. I believe we need to build more housing around transit routes and recognize that not everyone is going to end up in a home to begin with. I didn't. I lived in an apartment, then moved into a condominium, and then purchased a home.
Of course, apartments are skyrocketing in the rents now.
They are skyrocketing, but if you look at, again, when it comes to jobs and creating jobs, the goal is to create an economy where people can afford.
We're getting close to the end of our time on AirTalk for our two candidates in the 5th District. So I want to ask you just sort of a couple rapid fire that just pertain to the two county ballot measures. Yeah. First, Measure M, which would increase the county sales tax by 1/2 cent to pay for Metro's long-term transit plan. Ms. Barger, you support M?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Park? All right. The other is Measure A, a parcel tax to fund parks, beaches, river improvements, and other things. Ms. Barger, you support Measure A?
I love the measure, but I love M more.
Okay, so
I'm a hard
but you're
on
voting
M.
for A.
I'm hard on M. I believe the parcel tax is a good, solid parcel. I mean, I think it's a good tax toward parks, but my priority is to get Measure M passed.
Mr. Park?
Yes on A.
Okay. All right. Oh, I want to give you each a chance to give a closing 30-second statement. Ms. Barger, you first, please. Your closing appeal to voters.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having us here tonight. I think this has been a good, healthy dialogue and really does show the difference between my opponent and I. Having worked in the county for 28 years, starting as an intern and working my way up, I don't need any on-the-job training, and I can hit the ground running. This is an important seat, and the fact that I have the endorsement of the LA Chamber of Commerce, the Los Angeles Times, the LA Daily News, San Gabriel Valley Tribune, Pasadena Star News, as well as over 40 elected officials in the area, really does reflect the fact that they have confidence and that I can do the job and would be a good supervisor, so I'd ask for your vote.
Mr. Park.
I'm Darrell Park. I'm the Democratic candidate for supervisor in the 5th District. I'm running to raise the quality of life of every single person in this county. Nobody can look me in the eye and tell me your money's being spent well now. We will change things. We will create 100,000 new jobs with this nuclear reactor in space we call the sun. We will have an economy that's booming based on green energy. We will be the innovation center for green energy in the world. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you both very much for being with us. Thanks to all of you for joining us for our Crawford Family Forum debate, 5th District, LA County Board of Supervisors. From all of us at AirTalk, have a great afternoon. Welcome to AirTalk Overtime on kpecc.org. I'm Larry Mantle. We continue with our debate between the two finalists for the 5th District LA County Board of Supervisor race, Darrell Park and Kathryn Barger. Now we have an opportunity to hear from members of our Crawford Family Forum audience at this KPCC in-person event. Sir, your first name and the community you're from.
Richard, and from Altadena, California. What is your plan to cut or control costs related to the operating budget, the county's $28 billion budget?
Mr. Park, you want to start on that?
Yes, I've been a budget geek for many, many years. I worked for 10 years in the Office of Management and Budget, balancing the budget. We did it 4 times. Looking at almost $30 billion, we have so much waste, every single line. So $234,000 per kid in juvie. Other places in Scandinavia have figured this out with much better outcomes for about $70,000, and then you don't have the prison costs later on because you're creating much more responsible adults. We talked about homelessness before. You're paying $40,000 now, almost $1 billion, and for what? You can't point to anything that you've done to help those folks. Every single line in our budget has this amount of waste, and it's really well-intended people, but they don't have the solution to the problem, and they put more good money after bad. We know that these problems have been solved in other places. You take the solutions that have been implemented, and these solutions are never perfect at first, so their taxpayers have to go back several times. Once they do that, then you have a solution that works really well, and then we just have to implement it.
Ms. Barger.
So, I mean, that is an excellent question, and what we have 2 things in place. This year, we actually zeroed out, we found out the departments were using ghost positions in order to put aside money. So we force them to verify that those positions and why they're vacant, and if they're vacant for more than 3 months, the positions go away, the money goes back into the budget. That money then, what we do each year is we set aside at least 10% of our overall budget in what we call a rainy day fund, similar to a savings plan. If you run your house, you have a savings account. And so we're constantly looking at streamlining and making sure that departments are held accountable so they're not putting together ghost positions. We also have the Economy and Efficiency Commission, which has saved billions of dollars over the years. And what they do is they allow not managers, but line staff to bring in innovation and ideas on streamlining and making the process better as it relates to providing services. And that also is a way of saving and bringing down the amount of money we spend in departments.
Sir, your first name, community you're from, please.
Siddharth from Altadena. What are the core Democratic or Republican principles that will guide your decision-making when you're on the board?
And again, just to remind, this is a nonpartisan position. The supervisors don't run according to their party, but everybody knows the party that each of the supervisors are members of and know their general political philosophies. Ms. Barger, you want to start on that?
The fiscal restraint that is shown, and I stand hard on that. For the last 15 years, that's something I've been proud of. We've come in on budget and, in fact, have been able to set aside money for those rainy days. So being a fiscal conservative is very important to me, and it's why the credit rating for LA County is what it is, and why the state actually came to the county and asked us if we would float bonds because their credit rating was so poor. They came to us asking if we could do it for them.
Mr. Park.
One of the core democratic and progressive principles that I will operate under is we always protect the health and safety of our residents. We've had environmental disaster after environmental disaster in this district, from the worst gas well blowout in the history of the country to the leaky dump at Sunshine to the leaky dump at Chiquita. We will close down the dumps, and we will close down Aliso Canyon.
Where would you put the trash that's currently going to those landfills?
I'm glad you asked. You and your generosity, along with everyone else listening, has paid $400 million for an amazing state-of-the-art facility called Mesquite. It's in the site of an old mine, and they had done a bunch of other things there. The military had done some bombing and whatever, and This facility will hold 100 years of trash, has very limited groundwater. It's about 20 miles from the nearest residence. All the problems that we have with our current setup, this situation doesn't have. The same people are not going to get paid, all the trash haulers and truck people and the county that's making money off of these dirty dumps. That goes away. It gets sent by rail to this new facility. That facility, like I said, can hold 100 years of trash. It already went through a 5-year environmental approval process.
Okay. Those trains that are going to take it out there, though, are not clean trains. They're diesel trains, right? So
Yes.
you're comfortable with trains taking trash that distance?
Yes, but so that's a false comparison because you look at the truck traffic now, you have one truck carrying one load of trash. You have a huge train that has maybe 100 cars on it. The amount of CO2 that's being produced by that train is far less when you compare it to the amount of trucks.
But don't each of those small trucks have to serve neighborhoods and would have to get it to wherever the terminus of the train is?
Right now they have to truck it to these dumps. So if you're making
But
an
if they
argument,
take it the train, what's...
yeah, but if you're making
Okay.
an argument, the math works in favor of the train. There's a reason that Warren Buffett bought a railroad and not a trucking company.
I didn't think it was to move trash, but I take your... Ms. Barger?
Well, no, I really do believe, and actually when I met with the Sierra Club, we talked about this issue. Technology is such that we're finding, and even in the county, we've got a goal to bring down the amount of trash in our landfills by 80%, with an ultimate goal of over 90%. So with technology, I don't think you should be moving the trash to someone, to the desert or someone else's area. We should address it immediately. And with technology the way it is, there are going to be opportunities to bring down the amount of waste going into our landfill.
I
Mr.
need
Park,
to
though,
butt in
is-
because this is a life and death issue for the people in Aliso Canyon. This is a life and death issue for the people who live near the dumps. Those facilities have to be closed down immediately. And so, yes, I always hold up my wallet. It's a recycled bicycle tire. As a cyclist, I've thrown tons of these in the trash. This costs $25, $25 that should have gone in the trash that's now part of the economy.
Right.
We will recycle.
That's my
our-
point. That is my
Yeah.
point right there. We can do a better job of what we're recycling, and so we don't need to be shipping it out into the middle of the desert, which, by the way, the 5th District has a large amount of desert, and I want to protect it.
But his general point was that the County Board of Supervisors have really fell down on the job of protecting county residents and have not responded, enough to Aliso Canyon and other things. Your response to that?
Well, okay, Aliso Canyon is a gas, and on that, I actually do take exception, and I think if you talk to the people in Porter Ranch, they would take exception. Clearly, the state regulatory group, the PUC, was not properly monitoring Aliso Canyon, definitely.
And that's the state.
That's a state. I mean, it's regulated by the state. It's located in the county, but the state has full regulatory authority over Aliso Canyon. We have taken an active role, actually working with the senator out there, Fran Pavley, on legislation to address some of the shortcomings that the state put in play. But on the landfill, I also take exception because up in the Antelope Valley, we actually have a fee that's been imposed for out of the area trash coming in, and now this is going to be the first landfill in the state to apply for a license to do alternative energy at their landfill, which is going to be something that everyone is going to look
Okay.
at in terms of efficiencies.
I have to respond because this
Yeah,
is
okay,
really important.
quick,
When
yeah.
you talk to the people in Porter Ranch, and I was there from day one, they always smell gas, but they called me and they said, hey, we're smelling more gas. This is a year ago that we had these protests. I just bought my kid's Halloween costume, and those kids there were wearing their Halloween costumes to school on that
Okay.
day that we walked. No, but this is really important. When they called the supervisor's office, which is a harder number to find than your gas company number, the gas company called them back, not the supervisor's office. You cannot say
Okay.
that the supervisor's office was
I
looking
have
I
to
understand,
respond. I know,
and
I
then
have
we
to,
gotta
Larry, I have
drop
to,
it.
and then we'll drop
Yeah.
it. That is not true. And I can tell you, and if you call our office and talk to the staff that we've had on it, both in our Chatsworth field office as well as downtown, They were calling us because the gas company wouldn't respond. We've got consumer affairs involved, and in fact, we've been incredibly
and
aggressive.
Unfortunately, we
so,
can't bring that
No, I
resident
know.
in to figure all that out. But sir, your first name and what community are you from?
What role do you see autonomous vehicles playing in the LA, excuse me, LA mass transit system?
All right, Mr. Park, I think you started this.
I want to be the leader in autonomous vehicles. If we can figure this out here, we get to sell the technology, the hardware, the software, the connectivity to Beijing, to Shanghai, to all of Western Europe. We can be the leaders in this.
Does the county have much say over there? I mean, I think of cities as controlling the streets, the state controlling the freeways, highways. Does the county have much of a role in that?
I think we do. I think we have the opportunity, especially in the unincorporated areas, to make the county be the leader, especially the 5th district with all the open space we have here, to be the leader in this technology. I'll give you a 100% guarantee it's going to happen. We can either pay through the nose in other places, or we can have the jobs here, the companies here, the tax revenue here.
Ms. Barger.
Absolutely, I think it is going to have a major impact on transportation, and it's not a question of if, it's when. And in fact, the board members will have an impact because as having a seat on Metropolitan Transit Authority, which does all the transportation throughout the county, we're going to have an opportunity to possibly do it for our buses, as well as for carpools that are also subsidized through Metro. So I think there are opportunities, and again, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I remember when people didn't believe you'd be able to get money out of a machine if you put a card in. And now,
Where's that at?
I know, and no one believed that that would happen. And now I think that people probably go use ATMs more than they do go into the bank.
Your first name, please, and where are you from?
Michelle from Altadena. My question is, in a broad sense, what you plan to do for integrated resource management and water conservation, because often I've read county, if you look at what the county says they want to do, it looks really good.
Yes.
In terms of, green streets and, putting streets on a diet and all that. But when it comes down to actually implementing, more environmentally friendly policies in action, it's often a lot more difficult. And I just wanted to say one example is the crosstown pipeline that's being considered to build a pipeline that will begin in Pasadena and end in Pasadena, but cross all of Altadena and tear up Altadena streets in a project that has been described as more of a grant in search of a project, not really very
Okay. Well, let's take the more general one that you talked about, Ms. Barg. You want to start us on that?
The frustration is, we want to go green, and I was meeting with, again, an individual from one of the cities, and we were talking about the fact that the cost to do more asphalt that will actually allow the water to go back into our water table is incredibly costly, but also the lifespan of it is not as long as what's currently on the roads. So it is a challenge, and so the reason why it's not happening immediately is for cost. But what we are doing is we do have fields that we put in play up at the top of the mountains to let the water that's used to go into our channels and go out to the ocean is in fact now staying in these fields and going back into the water table. We also are looking at doing, for new housing projects, requiring purple lines, which means that there's recycled water that's going to go forward irrigation on the outside. We all know that most of the water we use is for irrigation. So why not use the gray water to water your plants outside and then use more drought tolerant?
Ms. Park.
So I'm an Altadena resident. I just wanted to address the pipeline. I'm completely opposed. We don't need it. It's not smart. It doesn't make sense.
What is the pipeline for? Because I'm not familiar with the project.
In my biased Altadena opinion, it's what was described, moving water from one place in Pasadena to another place in Pasadena, and using us as the roadway for that. And it just doesn't, one, we don't need the water moved, and two, it's a really expensive project. If you were gonna move it, there's a lot better ways to do it.
Okay.
But talking specifically about water, I watched all the water when it rained go down the driveway and then down the street and eventually pollute the ocean. We got water barrels. In my house, we have 625 gallons of water barrels. And so when it rains, in the middle of the night, I'm out there checking the water barrels like some kind of farmer. We have an opportunity to get really smart about this. The other thing that we did is gray water, and I want to see this in every single county facility. We had fruit trees that I didn't want to rip up. The last people had spent decades getting these things beautiful. So what can we do? Oh, we have 16 gallons of our washing machine with really, they call it gray water, and it's gross and it smells. But the plants like that a lot more than the water that comes out of the tap. So every time you do laundry, it gets to be on those plants. We can implement those across our county. And once again, we can be the innovators.
Ms. Barger, did you want to chime in on something or not?
No, I was just thinking you use organic detergent though, right?
Yes. And if anybody wants to know the brand and all that, it's really important because if you use the wrong one, you can kill the plant.
I was going to say, anyone with 625 gallons or whatever cisterns on your property, I'm sure you know the detergent to use.
Yeah.
But, sir, your first name and your community, please.
Yes, my name is David. I'm from South Pasadena. My question is as follows. In what ways would you encourage economic vitality in the county, in particular in your district, so as to reduce unemployment and homelessness while protecting the natural environment? And I'd like to make sure you don't get diverted. I'm not talking about climate change or stopping coal mining in Appalachia. I'm talking about mainly land use policy in this county.
Mr.
Also,
Park.
just one more point. You know, moving trash 100 miles by rail, I can tell you, as a representative of the environmental community, that's adamantly opposed by desert residents in the Sierra Club.
Okay. Mr. Park, your response to the land use
so
question.
we're going to create 100,000 new jobs. A lot of those formerly homeless folks, a lot of those gang members, a lot of those 18 to 34-year-olds that are living in their parents' basements, those solar jobs, I'll tell you from somebody who started solar companies, it's hot up on that roof. If you don't have gloves on, you can burn yourself. If you're not tied down, you can fall off. But you know what? It pays $25 an hour if you're good and you hustle. It doesn't take that long to get your electrician's license, and that's $40 an hour. You don't have to have a college education or a master's degree or anything to do this. We're going to put solar on 750,000 roofs, and we're going to build a lot more in the desert. We're going to put solar everywhere. The technology is well understood. It's cost effective. It makes sense. It cleans our air, cleans our water. And you know what? It's happening. So we need to profit from it. We need to get the benefit from it. We need to be the innovators. If a place like Germany can do it, we have 3 to 5 times the sun load that they do. They've already made billions and billions of dollars off of this.
Ms. Barger.
I completely support solar, but unfortunately up in the Antelope Valley where we have solar farms, they do not employ a lot of people. As a matter of fact, when they're building them is when they employ, and then the minute they go into effect, it only takes 2 or 3 employees to operate a solar farm. But I do support solar. What we can do, I mean, I know when I talk to the Sierra Club, one of the issues that's frustrating me is CEQA, and not because CEQA is a bad thing, but because CEQA has become something that is used to prevent jobs from coming into the region. And I'll use Kinkasharo as an example up in the Antelope Valley, where they were ready to come in and they build all of our trains for the light rail. But there was an organization that tried to prevent them from coming in using CEQA as a reason. It had nothing to do with the environment. It's the California Environmental Quality Act. It had nothing to do with the environment. So I want to sit down and look at how we address the loopholes in that, and also look at what we, the county, working with the state, because the county is only one portion of what is preventing some of the businesses from coming and locating in California. I think we need to do a better job of doing a little more give and take with some of these companies to see what it is that's preventing them from coming and creating jobs.
I want to thank you both very much. Thank you for your questions, for attending tonight. Darrell Park, Kathryn Barger, candidates for the 5th District, LA County Board of Supervisors, November 8th, Election Day. Thank you so much for being part of KPCC's voter game plan and this important debate for the Board of Supervisors. Have a terrific evening.